All right, everybody, welcome back to BAN-KAST. This will be covering Bleach, Thousand Year Blood War Arc, Episode 35, Don't Chase a Shadow. It's an act of futility. You just do not want to be chasing a shadow. I used to do that when I was a kid. Did anybody else do that when they were a kid? Just, like, be really bored out of your mind and you just, like, chase your shadow around the yard? Really? I was the only one? Okay, whatever. Mayuri finds it funny. All right, so before we get into the episode, I just want to assess the situation we are in right now, okay? So I wrote down, in the order that they happen in the manga, the chronology of the fights that we get. So right now, as we are in the middle of Mayuri versus Pernida, this is moved around in the anime a bit. These are all just, like, the entirety of the fight happens in the manga, and then Shunsui's fight with Lilia happens, and then Askin's fight with Yoruichi and Urahara happens. So the way they're doing this here is that we had Baby Hold Your Hand in the last episode. This episode is the first half of the fight between Shunsui and Lilia. Next episode is going to be Baby Hold Your Hand Part 2, and that's going to conclude the fight, so you see what they're doing here, okay? So just so everybody's on the same page. Let's begin with Basby versus Hashwolf. That already happened at this point in the manga. It has not been shown yet in the anime. They're probably going to cover that after the fight with Lilia, I would assume, or maybe even further down the line. So that happens in the 630s. Then Mayuri versus Pernida is from chapter 635 to 644. Then Shunsui versus Lilia Barrow is 645 to 654. Then you have a little bit of the setup stuff between, Gerald Valkyrie and Kenpachi and Byakuya and everybody, but the fight with Askin, Urahara, and Yoruichi kind of gets started right after the fight with Shunsui versus Lilia. That is chapter 655 to 666. It's a pretty big fight. A lot of stuff happens there. Then we have Gerard versus Toshiro, Kenpachi, and Byakuya. That lasts from 667 to 672. And then right after that, remember, the Bleach manga ends at chapter 686, and the last two chapters are epilogue chapters. So 685 and 686 are epilogue. We skipped it like 10 years in the future. So really, it's 684 is when the battle ends with Yuha Baha being defeated, all right? So right after the, 672 is after the whole fight with Gerard kind of doesn't really conclude, but the fighting, he gets his head blown off by Byakuya's technique, and then he comes back later. So the final battle is 673 to 684. And that's it. That's it. That's the end of the Bleach manga. Now, there's some other stuff that happens there, too. Hashwolf and Uryu fight at a certain point there, though that fight kind of cuts back and forth. I don't think there's ever really a dedicated chapter to them fighting. It's always just like we cut back to see what they're doing with the balance and the antithesis. Chad and Ganju fight some statues at some point in there. But, that's basically the structure of what we have for the remainder of the manga. So obviously that is not going to be the way this is going to go down, because I have been told many times and I keep forgetting, yes, there is going to be a fourth cord to this, and we still have, a few episodes left of this one. So, yeah, I just wanted to lay that out there to see where we were at and what's going to happen. So this episode is going to be Lilia versus Shunsui. Next episode is going to conclude this fight here with Nemu taking on Pernida, and then I would assume the episode after that will include the stuff with Nanao releasing her Zanpakuto against Lilia, and that'll conclude that stuff there. But just like we had Renji versus Uryu a couple episodes back, there's going to be a lot more stuff added in. So just understand that. So we kick off this episode with the conclusion from the last one, where we have Mayuri's moment of triumph, like, yes, I have made a giant baby, and I have devoured the hands. Oh boy, what's going on now? So we have Konjiki Ashisoki Jizo beginning to rupture with, like, it seems like there's a bunch of giant hams firing off a bunch of Quincy bows inside of it, but that couldn't possibly be the situation. So that's what's happening there, and Mayuri is kind of like, oh shit, I might be in a little bit of trouble here. I've never actually had to deal with this. Okay, left arm of the Soul King. It's okay though. I am the mad scientist of the Soul Reapers. I'm sure I'll be fine. Yeah, that's kind of all we get there. We have a cutaway from the other members of the Gotei, the ones that haven't been shot in the back yet, and they're all kind of being like, "Oh, this is Captain Kurotsuchi." Yeah, well, he is Captain Kurotsuchi, so it's him. I'm sure he'll be fine. That's some praise from Uehara. I got to give him that. Not that they had any real ability to go and help him right now. They're in the middle of their own thing. But it is cool that Uehara's like, yeah, I mean, it's Mayuri. He's the second smartest person in the Gotei 13. It's basically how Uehara views him. He pretty much says as much. He's like, oh yeah, Mayuri Kuretsuchi, he's a genius. I mean, I'm still better, but like, he's a genius. So he'll probably be okay. So this battle is, of course, what we're focusing on today, where everybody is running away from Lilia as he's just sniping from that position. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to pull up something here. I'm going to pull up... This is the group that arrived at the Soul Palace, okay? This is who we had to work with initially, all right? Many of these characters have been shot at this point, or have either gone off and done other things. So, Maurecchio got shot, Sentaro and Kione got shot, we also had Shuhei that got shot. Renji went off to fight against Uryu. He's taken out for the moment. Yushiro is still with this group. Soifone, and Shinji and Momo are still there. Rukia is still there. Nanao's gonna go off with Shunsui here in a moment. Isane got shot. Now, when it comes to the Visors, Love, Hachigen, and Hiyori in the manga, and it also includes Mashiro here in the anime. They go off and they have a little bit of a moment where they fight against Gerard later. They do a cool combination attack, but we don't really see them in this episode. So we can assume their group just split off from this group, I think, because I remember they do, like, Hiyori does a cool, like, tri-Sero, like, triple Sero against Gerard, but that happens a lot later. So, yeah, I'm going to assume they all went off in a separate group, so, they can't get killed, and Mashiro is probably part of their group. Byakuya as well. Byakuya is fine. But I just wanted to throw that up there to see how many people we started with this group, and now they've been whittled down considerably there. So we see Yushiro, Soifone, Rukia is running next to Byakuya there, and then we have Momo and Shinji, and then we have Nanao, Uehara, and Shunsui. That's it. That's all we have left. So, I'm just throwing this out there, like, I don't know, like, Shunsui's going to do a thing in a moment, so he's going to be able to counter the long-range sniping, and he's going to activate his Zanpakuto's ability, Kata and Kyokatsu, making children's games a reality. But I'm just curious, like, there's really nothing else anybody else could have done here, so they're running away from Lilia as he's just boom, 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 kill streak bonus, boom, boom. Okay, Predator missile online, boom, boom. There's nothing else anybody could have done here to try to, like, stop that. Now, look, I get they can't, like, stop and, like, Maurecchio, hang on, because they're just going to get shot too. I get that. And they don't know where Lily is at right now. Although, he shot like 6 of you. I feel like you should have a good idea on where he's located at this point. I mean, like, I don't know, Byakuya, throw up Senbone Sakura as like to obscure his vision. Soifone, you have a big fuck off missile that you could maybe fire in the general direction that the shots are coming from. Like, I don't know, Yushiro's got combustion Shunko. Shinji could reverse everything and maybe like mess with Lilia's perception. Okay, that one's going to be difficult because that needs to be relatively close range. I don't think he can really do that at a long range. That's fair. And his Bankai is not going to help in this situation either. Nanao knows a lot of keto barriers. Like just to throw up shit to kind of like block the shots. I mean, then again, okay, that's not going to work because Lilia has the ability to pierce through anything, but I would assume we don't see them doing that, and they don't know that ability, so that's the thing. Just kind of, like, showing them trying to do some things. Like, I can actually see that. Like, maybe Byakuya is like, I got this, everybody. I'll use Danku. I'll use Bakudo number 81, Danku, this barrier that can block any shot. So Byakuya uses Danku, and then, boom, Lilia pierces right through it, and Byakuya's like, oh, shit, he can pierce anything. That's not good. Keep running, right? Now, the interesting, though, is, like, if they try to use something like if Rukia tried using like icy mist to kind of like cover the area, that might actually help, although the Ryatsu sensing of Lilia would probably also pierce through that. Look, all of these ideas I'm throwing out, Lilia would be able to counter, but they're not doing any of them, so I'm just like, are they trying any of that, or are they just like, there's nothing we can do, let's just run, okay? Well, anyway, doesn't matter, and of course you have Uehara there too, who could probably come up with a bunch of things in this situation, but it's okay, because we got Shunsui. We got the head captain of the Gotei 13, Shunsui Kyoto. Raku, he's got this. So he immediately is like, there's enough running. He unsheaths his sword, he strikes a battle pose, and like epic music starts up, and then he just immediately gets shot. He just gets immediately pumped through a lead. Okay, now this dude, I remember reading these chapters way back in the day, and I remember this one in particular was like, oh man, this was confusing because like a bunch of stuff happens all at once here, and it's like what's the order of operations that leads Shunsui to this? Okay, so Shunsui gets shot right in the center mass, right in the heart, gets that blown out. We can see him there, and he's like, oh man, Shunsui's dead. But then all of a sudden we begin to hear strange little like Daruma-san koronda, and then Shunsui appears right next to Lilia on top of a building, slices the gun barrel. And he's just like, oh, man, you're pretty fast. You avoided my attack. That's pretty cool. I've taken your weapon. Next is your life. Oh, dude, when Shunsui gets serious, because he's a very lackadaisical individual. He just likes to chill out and drink some sake and watch the cherry blossoms fall. But, dude, when he gets serious, he gets serious. He's like, okay, it's time to clock into work as the head captain of the Gote 13. Time to go. Time to fight, right? Okay. So, Lilia, you know, he has a status to uphold. He's Sternritter X. He's the first Quincy that was given powers by Yuha Baha. So, you know, he's also on the side of, like, I'm never really going to let on that I am bested. I'm pretty much, you know, I'm strong, right? They begin by explaining the powers, which, given Shunsui's abilities, it's like the whole point of it is children's games are reality. You can't really play a game unless the other person knows the rules, which is kind of bullshit because he does these abilities without the other person knowing the rules. Although, Lilia does mention he has a similar game that he knows how to play, so that's interesting. It's not like Nen, but kinda. Like, you know, because in like Hunter x Hunter, the way that, you know, Togashi does it is you will have characters explaining their abilities, but in that case it does make sense because explaining the ability kind of is maybe a trigger for the ability to get it stronger, you know, to like add it to like contract for effects. So I'm curious if it's something similar with Shunsui. Like if Shunsui tries an ability and the opponent doesn't have any idea what this game is, it doesn't work. But that's not the case because he uses Daruma-san and it works fine. All right, he uses Daruma-san falls down and it works perfectly fine, and he's able to teleport over to Lilia, and he does explain the game after, and Lilia's like, well, we also have a game called Chocolate Angles, and that's kind of the same thing. And Shunsui's like, oh, you've already known it, then why did I bother explaining it then? Kind of a situation, right? So, I mean, and then we have the ability, then we have the games that he was using against Stark, like he used Taka Oni, and then he used Iro Oni, and then he used Kage Oni, and he explains some of these like after the fact or before the fact, but like they go through either way, so I don't know. It might just be more of a preference for Shunsui here. Nanao arrives, and Shunsui's pretty, you know, it's like, oh, hey, you were able to keep up with me. That's pretty good. And Nanao's like, yeah, of course. I'm just going to stay here and help you battle. And Shunsui's like, yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea. This guy's really strong. You should just probably leave. And she's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, okay, fine. Like Shunsui's aware of how Nanao is at this point, so he's not even going to try to argue with her. He's like, I would prefer if you weren't here. I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, could you at least go back and tell everybody that I'm here and I'm going to be fighting this guy and they can go on ahead? Sure, I'll go do that, but I'm going to come right back here after that's over. I'm like, okay, fine. That's, I guess, compromise, I suppose. So she heads off. He has a nice little moment where he's like, wow, she's really starting to sound a lot like Lisa. Oh, dear me. Oh, what have I gotten myself into? So Lilia mentions that I have recorded everything from your previous battles, which doesn't really help much because Shunsui's ability kind of like just by the nature of it lends it to having a lot of unique powers that are all different. So Lilia might know that Katen Kyokatsu allows him to create children's games into reality, but that doesn't give you like the full like breadth of what he could do with that, right? There's like we probably have not even seen half of all the games that he could play in his Shikai alone, right? So the idea is like, okay, I know what your ability is. You make children's games reality. It's like, great. That's how many games do you know? It's like, oh, like 2 or 3. I'm like, yeah, okay, I have way more than that. That's not really going to help you. But, you know, he acts a little bit of cocky here. He likes like, oh yeah, I know what you're all about, right? That's how that works. So Shunsui begins to explain, you know, Daruma-san, you know, falls down, or basically it's red light, green light. Is if you've ever played the game in like the United States, that's the game that like we called it when I was growing up. Of course, depending on your culture and what part of the world you're in, it's going to have a different name. But the way that this works is there's one. the person that is it, which in this case would be Lilia, has to be in a place where everyone can see him or her. And then the second rule is if any other players touch it before he or she can catch anyone, then they lose. And then there's another rule too. And if it catches anybody moving, that person loses. Okay, so these rules are required to happen. So when he activated this ability, and what happened was the location of Lilia was lit up in the sky, like you're playing a video game and you just like pinged him. You just like ping, and just like, okay, he's right there. I know exactly where the person that it is from any vantage point, right? Then you could travel in a straight line, like as the crow flies, you know, directly wherever that person is, right? Now, the only wrench in this is the person seeing you move, then you lose. And in Shunsui's games, the idea is if you win, you live, and if you lose, you die, okay? So Shunsui had to do a little bit of something here, and he calls, Lilia says, oh, it's Chocolate Ingalls. That's the name of the game that we played it in my culture. Okay, so there is a little bit of a difference here that doesn't have anything to do with the game. It's more about Shunsui's skill. So he says initially, Lilia assumes that the Shunsui he shot that had the giant hole in his chest, that was something that was part of the game. It wasn't. That was Shunsui solidifying his Reiatsu and leaving it in that spot. And then Lilia is so good at Reishi sensing, he mistook that clump of Reiatsu for the actual Shunsui. Okay? And so he kind of goes into explain like Reiatsu sensing versus actual sight with your eyes. Like when you're like a certain high level of combatant, you're going to be fighting more with your sixth sense rather than your actual eyesight. And so he was taking advantage of that and was able to make him think that he was killed, right? Oh, and there's also a moment here with Shinji and Momo where they're like, oh, don't worry, he'll be fine. And then Shinji has a moment where he's just like, yeah, let's just get going, right? We're not going to go back him up. We're just going to get going. Because Shinji mentions Uketake and like, hey, guys, if Uketake was here, what would he say? And Uketake would, of course, be like, Shunsui's got this, leave it to him and go. And Shinji is like, I mean, I guess Uehara is there too, and Byakuya as well, and Soifone, but Shinji is the one that has more of a level head here, and he's like, we got to get going, okay? We got to get moving. If he says he's got to handle it, he's got to handle it. Also, it's interesting that it's coming from Shinji now that we know about how his Bankai works. That's actually kind of cool, because Shinji would know better than anybody that a Bankai is not necessarily something conducive to being used in a group, and sometimes it's actually very detrimental to use it in his group, and his is a perfect example of that. So maybe Shinji's like, maybe Shunsui wanted to fight him on his own because something his Zanpakuto can do is like deleterious to us, so let's just keep going, okay? So that could be something there too. There's Momo. Momo is like, you know what? I'm betting money on Momo surviving through this. Momo didn't get shot. She was able to avoid all of that. She's going for it. She's gonna survive. Shinji also brings up Yamamoto too. By the way, something else to add to even like laying on even deeper that, you know, he wouldn't want us to go help us. He wouldn't want us to go help him because that is the role of the head captain. This is how this all works. He will be fine, right? Now, Nanao is obviously going to go back, but the other's going to keep moving. Okay, so we cut back to the fight with Shunsui and Lilia. He attempts to use the same game he used earlier, red light, green light. Daruma-san falls down. This time he does a similar trick because Lilia thinks he's going to do the exact same thing, like, oh, you're going to coalesce your Reiatsu together and make an illusion. You're over here, right? Fooled you. But unfortunately, that's not the same thing that he's going to do this time. It's a different technique. It's a shadow technique. Similar, he kind of combines like 3 different games at once here. He uses Kage Oni to like attack him from below, and then he uses Daruma-san falling down to like initially like the feint. And then there's also a technique called Shadow Seeking, which is a game where you stare at your shadow and then you quickly turn to another surface and you kind of project your shadow on that surface kind of game, like playing with your like the sense of your sight, and like, you know, a certain image gets stuck in your like retinas and you turn it, and like for the moment that image is still there. So he combines games, he adds games together. Sometimes Shunsui seems to indicate that like the games he plays with Katen Kyokatsu are very fickle and they change all the damn time, but they seem to be very conducive to whatever Shunsui is doing. Like, I need to combine 3 games here in order to make it work, and he can kind of just do that whenever, right? So Shunsui gives him a little bit of praise. He's like, hey, you're the first person to dodge my Kage-Oni on the first try. Yeah, even the first Espada couldn't do that. Remember when Stark got stabbed? I remember that. That was a fun time. I love Stark. Stark was such a badass character. I wish he wouldn't have died. Why couldn't it have been Stark in the Garganta instead of Grimjow? I'd have loved that even more. It wouldn't have made any sense. You know, like the portal's opening and then like Ichigo's looking inside like, wait, is that Grimjow? And Stark's like, no, it's just me. I have no relation to you whatsoever. Yeah, me neither. Anyway, so you want to go fight the Quincy's? Yeah, okay, let's do that. Dude, Stark versus Askin would have been fun to see. That would have been really fun to see. Anyway. So this one in particular, he does mention, hey, I do know that technique because I've seen it before because we have data on all of your previous battles. And with that being said, Shunsui did get shot in the foot right there, so it doesn't look too good. He's like, oh man, I thought I dodged that shit. Why do I always have to fight the guy with guns? Had to fight the Arankar with guns, then I had to fight that Quincy with a mustache that used guns. Now I gotta fight you with a gun. Damn it. I even tried to cut the gun down so you couldn't even use it, and you're still using the damn gun. Oh, man. So he announces himself, of course. I am X of the Stern Ritter, X-axis Lilia Barrow. I am the first Quincy that His Majesty gave a script to, and now I will activate my powers, right? Shoots through Shunsui again. Oh, wait, so this is the shadow-seeking ability right here. I thought I skipped over that earlier, but no, that was the case. So still, combining a lot of games together. So that's where he uses that power. And we have a little bit of a showcase here of like the symbolic representation of a child grabbing Shunsui by the hand and taking him to go play a game. And it's like, whether you like it or not, you can only play until you die. You can't get out of this anymore. Okay, so let's just keep playing a game until one of us dies. All right. So he slices up the gun again, trying to like, come on, I'm done with this gun shit, right? Okay. However, Lilia can just recover the gun using his it's his bow, which makes sense. It's made out of Ryatsu. It's just, it looks more solid than some of the other Quincy bows and weapons. Then again, like BG9 had a giant minigun made out of reishi, so there you go. So yeah, he could just use his ability, and the name of his weapon is Diagram. He uses that to reforge the gun. That's a pretty cool name, actually, for that. The gun is my bow, and it's made entirely out of reishi. I see. So I'm just going to have to, like, you know, use my Kage-Oni again to attack you out of the shadows. So he's using this, and he attacks Lilia from a bunch of different directions here all at once, okay? Like, a bunch of... He quite literally uses the Kagebushi no Jutsu. I mean, what else do you call these? They are shadow clones, right? So he uses that technique, stabs him from behind, and Shunsui wins, right? I mean, he wins if the Quincy's didn't have any other abilities that we know that they totally have. But, you know, that's how initially it has to go. They dominate the fight, and then it's like, wait a minute, I can use my power. So, a couple of things with Lilia's ability. So, you notice the entire time he fights with one of his eyes shut. Every time Shunsui kind of gets the jump on him, he opens his eyes a very brief amount of time. Now, this is something that's really cool in the anime. They actually show this. They show the previous fights that he was in, or the previous encounters against Shunsui, and you see him very briefly opening an eye to dodge the attack. This is not something that is shown in the manga. It's just kind of stated that, like, oh yeah, all those other times that you almost killed me, I opened my eyes there and then shut it really quick. You actually see that in the anime, so I got to give them props for that there. However, he says, if I open my eyes a third time, I can keep them open for the entire battle. You know, the reason I kept it shut to begin with is it would be unfair for sinners. You're going to see in a moment how OP Lilia's Volstandig is, and the ability. I mean, he basically turns into a light monster that's really hard to kill. Even blowing up his head doesn't do it. Kind of the same thing with Gerard. So he's kind of like, once again, having a little bit of an ego there of just like, yes, I'm going to fight with a handicap to make sure that, you know, it's a fair fight for the sinners. Otherwise, I would just kill them immediately. And where's the fun in that, right? Okay, so kind of the idea of us just like playing with the idea of like, oh, we're so much stronger than you. You can't possibly hope to beat me. Shunsui has a nice little line of dialogue where he's like, oh, that's great. Hey, so can you just shut your eye again so we could go back to fighting normally? Because whenever he stabbed him and he opens his eye, the ability is literally he becomes like intangible. So the blade just kind of slides right out of Lilia and he can't be damaged. He basically opens the invincibility cheat whenever he opens both of his eyes. So he's like, yes, but you allowed me to open my eyes 3 times. So now, loophole, I can keep them open the rest of the battle. Shunsui's like, okay, that's kind of bullshit, but whatever. And with that, Lilia activates his Volstandig, and it's actually really cool the way he does it. Okay, he has one of my favorite releases because one of his eyes goes like green with the power, and then like the Quincy cross, like the X shoots out of it in like the shape of a cross, and then activates the power. So Lilia's, oh, that's really cool too. And like part of the cross is like below the roof that they're standing on right now, so it just shoots out like this. And so Lilia's Volstandig, it means Judgment of God. Jilliel, which I find funny. Like Jill, his Volstandig is Jill. So it can, I think it's pronounced more of like a Z or a Z. It's like Zael. Zael, divine judgment is what it means. And pretty interesting looking one, if nothing else. He loses his arms. Interesting design choice. It molds shape quite a bit. It kind of gives him freedom. It really reminds me of, like, if you've ever looked into, like, biblically accurate angels, which there's a bunch of different kinds of angels. There's, like, the powers and the principalities and the thrones. They don't all look like, you know, people with just large feathery wings, which is kind of how, like Gerard's wings look, you know, when he goes into his, right? Or, like, the initial stage of his release. No, some of the angels look really, like, nightmarish and the, like, you know, like Lovecraftian with the way that they're depicted. And so maybe that's what Kubo was kind of going with something here with Lilia's release. So the weirder form it takes, like, typically the stronger it is. Like, if this happens in a video game, like, you know, boss music starts playing and it's in Latin and it's like, oh boy, here we go, right? So Shunsui is like, huh, I can't move. That's really not good. I'm paralyzed. That's bad. And boom, he gets blasted through. I would say 3 times, but no. Thankfully, Shunsui's hat took one of those hits. The hat was like, no, Shunsui, I'll protect you. You know, the hat is his life item, so it saved him from one of the hits. But yeah, a good chunk of his shoulder and arm and chest, as well as, like, I think that's where his kidney would be. Yeah, that got completely obliterated. So it's been a while since I've read the chapters, and I should have gone back and reread this whole fight. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't remember him ever. So when he went into his release, he used some ability to paralyze Shunsui, and I don't remember that ability ever properly being explained, and I also don't remember him ever using it again. So, because I remember that was a point of contention. Like, I remember we go through that whole battle, and then I remember somebody bringing up, like, way back in, like, 2015, 2016, like, how come Lilia never used that ability to paralyze Shunsui after that one moment? It's like, huh. Yeah, I don't remember him ever actually using it again, so I don't know if it'll ever be explained, but whatever. So, yeah, he gets pumped through a holes, and then we're going to get the cutaways here. We get 2 of them. We get the first one, that is Shunsui. I have the translations pulled up here. I am interested in the way that they, you know, took Shunsui into the English alphabet with a Y, S-Y-U-N-S-U-I. So that's interesting. And it's like in the subtitles, you can even see it as S-H-U-N-S-U-I. But that's just an interesting translation there. The current captain commander of the Gotei 13 and former captain of the 8th Division, succeeding Yamamoto Genryusai, he now leads the Gotei 13 with great authority and composure. Despite his relaxed and easygoing demeanor, Kyoraku is a master strategist and one of the most powerful Shinigami in existence. It says it right there. His dual-wield Zanpakuto, Katen Kyokatsu, reflects his unorthodox and playful yet deadly combat style. Kyoraku is known for his love of sake and his gentle attitude towards women. Oh, that's what you call it. But beneath his lighthearted exterior lies a deeply calculating mind. As a child, he often played games, jokingly inventing his children's games Duel, Katen Kyokatsu, which will later become his fearsome battle technique. Keep in mind, once again, this is ChatGPT, so it might not be a one-to-one kind of translation here. It seems to imply that he created the Zanpakuto ability when he was a kid before he had a Zanpakuto, but yeah, just ignore that. That's fine. That's just the AI doing that. Next up, we have Lilia Barrow, and his translation is, the script is X, representing the ability X-axis. This power allows Lilia to pierce through anything in his line of sight, ignoring all physical barriers and defenses. He is regarded as the most divine and perfect creation granted by Yuha Baha, making him the ultimate sniper. Using his rifle-shaped weapon, Diagram, Lilia can fire shots that pass through all matter and opponents without resistance. When Lilia activates his Diagram, his form evolves, reflecting his connection to divine power. His body structure becomes unique, akin to the shape of a crescent moon moon, and he fights with unparalleled spiritual energy and precision. Once again, I don't know how much the ending paragraph there was accurate. Obviously not using his diagram to gain his Volstandig. But then the position of, or the shape of a crescent moon, not really what I was getting from his release, but yeah, there you go. So once again, translations. Okay, so Shunsui bails. He bails. Hey, have you ever been playing a video game and then you get into a boss fight and it's very, very clear that you are way under-leveled, or this boss fight was something you did not expect, and it's like, shit, we need to get out of here. We need to bail, get out of here. Flee combat. That's I think where Shunsui's at right now. So he runs away, and he has a cool little line here where he's like, man, I run away well for an injured guy. I run away really well for having a hole in my kidney and missing a shoulder. Damn. It's just like, yeah. And also a hole in his foot, too. He also got shot in his foot. So, yeah, that's pretty neat there. So, Shunsui is a very pragmatic guy, though. He's a pretty smart dude, and he realizes pretty quickly, like, all right, there's really no way I can beat this guy. He attacks him again. They get knocked into a building. He's like, amazing how you can run away with those wounds. However, I can teleport now. Didn't expect that, did you? I also love, this is like, I think the only time we really go inside one of these Quincy buildings in the Varvelt. So I guess Kubo expands about that a little bit. Like, yeah, they're buildings. They have windows and doors. Nothing really in it yet. I mean, the whole idea is this is where all the Quincy's are going to live, I guess, after all the Gotei are killed, all the Shinigami are purged. This is where the Quincy's are going to move into their new apartment complexes and stuff like that. So, yeah, how about that? Would you like to live in the Varvelt? Does the Varvelt seem like a nice place to live? I don't know. I wouldn't want to live in a building that has, like, these stalactites over here and stuff like that, like the ice everywhere. I feel like it feels cold. It feels like a cold, barren place. It's really you know, a dreary kind of, you know, and it's just like there's a draft. You know, I don't think those windows were like weather sealed and stuff like that. It just doesn't seem like a great place to live in. So Shunsui does try one more thing before we get to Bankai time. He's like, all right, every attack passes through you. Let's try a Kido attack. So he uses a Kido blade, Hado number 78, Zangaren, which is like, hold on, I actually pull that up right here and give you the translation of that here. It is slicing flower ring. That's a cool thing. And I also, once again, one of the very few times we've seen Shunsui use a Kido. I hesitate to say it's the only time, because somebody will probably ultimately point to a moment. No, he uses this against Stark, or he used this back at the Soul Society arc. You know, he definitely doesn't use Kido very often, but here it's probably one of the more higher level ones that he knows. So the fight with Askin and Ichigo, we have a little bit of stuff expanded upon that there. This is not in the manga. He mentions to Ichigo, hey, you've had some weird training in the Soul Palace, right? And Ichigo's like, yeah, what's it to you? And Askin's like, well, I understand what your ability is kind of sort of now. Like, not really, but the whole idea is that Askin is like adjusting things for lethal dosage. He mentions that adjusting the Ryatsu doesn't really do anything to Ichigo because of the training he's had up here, but all that Askin says is like, oh, thank you for confirming that. Now all I need to do is adjust the flavoring, as it were, right? And then I'll be able to fight you properly, okay? So he creates a couple more gift balls, and he's like, oh, I'm not talking nonsense. I'm being very lethal, okay? So we cut back to Shunsui, and he's like, damn it. Okay, I know Kido wouldn't have really, like, killed him or done anything major, but, like, didn't even scratch him. Holy shit. Like, I thought I was going to at least do, like, come on, can I get, like, 1 damage? Can I at least, like lower the health bar a little bit here? He's like, all right. Guess there's not much I can do now. Guess it's time for a Bankai. So he ran all the way back to where they originally entered into the Varvelt, and this is like at the perimeter of one of the palaces. So he's like, I should be far away, that my ability is not going to drag everybody else into it. He knows Nanao is coming back, so he's hoping Nanao doesn't get, you know, dragged into this and die as well. He says he's sorry, but he activates his Bankai, and the Bankai is really cool, right? So the Bankai activates at the exact same time he says Bankai. The mood in the entire area shifts big time, and so Ichigo is rushing to attack Askin, and he stops because the entire area just goes super weird. Like an Instagram or Snapchat filter just gets plastered over everything, and it's like sepia tone a little bit, and there's that wavy pattern on all the buildings, and Ichigo's like, whoa, okay, who turned on the filter? Who turned on the grid pattern on the sky? Are we in the Matrix right now? There's Yoruichi tending to Grimmjow. He got taken out. There's an added line of dialogue in the manga. It's not shown here in the anime. When he activates his Bankai, they all kind of realize, oh, I just realized there was that scene with Askin on the pole. There's a scene in the manga where Askin is like pole dancing a little bit, like, hello there, Ichigo. And they cut that out in this episode. Damn, I remember that. That was a cool scene. So there's a scene with Ganju, Orihime, and Chad. And Ganju says, what? It got dark and cold all of a sudden. And Chad's like, no, the temperature didn't drop. It didn't get any darker either. It just, I have the chills. So it doesn't affect like the actual like your sight or your sense of like, you know, thermalception of like sensing temperature. That's a thing. Thermoception, that's a thing. That's one of our senses. You think we only had 5 senses? No, we have way more than that. Equilibriumception is another one. Equilibrium. Anyway, so it doesn't affect anything like that. It's affecting your mind. It's kind of an illusion, but it's one of those illusions that's so real it might as well be real, right? So he activates his Bankai, and just like a calligraphy pen activates and like starts drawing the images of these trees, that happens. We get like the ooh activating in the background. Katen Kyokatsu, Karamatsu Shinju. And a shadowy figure appears draped over Shunsui as he activates the power, which is his Zanpakuto spirit, or one half of his Zanpakuto spirit, I should say, as seen in the Zanpakuto Rebellion arc, because that is the first time we do get to see her. So the whole area becomes very theatrical. I mean, honestly, if nothing else, Shunsui's Bankai really livened up the place a little bit. I mean, like, everything was just very purple and blue up until now, and now it's like, oh, look, you got some yellows, and some yellows, and some green, and some more purple, okay, added there, and like the sepia tone, you know, filters over it. Ichigo senses it as Shunsui's spiritual pressure. We see a little bit of how Lilia's body can be manipulated. He gets turned into, like a horse centaur being. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of looks like a crescent moon, I suppose, I guess. And he activates his landing gear. He lands here. And he even senses that something is weird. Like, the feeling is definitely off here. The sky has turned into a grid pattern all of a sudden. So we see Shunsui arriving at the battle, and we see, like, a little bit of... I like to think that little, like will-o-wisp on his back, because Lilia is unable to see his Zanpakuto spirit. Same thing with anybody else. Like, only Shunsui can see, and also, I guess, Nanao a little bit later. Well, actually, I should say half of his spirit, because there's 2. Katen is the older woman that apparently is in a relationship with Shunsui, and he calls her Ohana, and she calls him Sakura Nosuke. And then you have Kyokatsu, which is the child form of the Zanpakuto that is hiding Nanao's true Zanpakuto, and we'll get to that in a later episode there. But yeah, I like to think that little wispy thing is the vestige of that, and Lilia just kind of turns his head and just kind of notices it. Like, he can't really see her, but like the vestige of her, that's kind of cool. Like, he notices like there's something there, but he can't quite, you know, see it. That's the way I interpret that. So Lilia's like, you've finally shown yourself. Oh, well, I guess it's time to die. Shunsui's like, yes. How does the world look to you right now? Huh? I don't know. I mean, looks very yellow. Like we're in the holodeck, I guess. You see, it's dark and lonely, full of despair, isn't it? Lilia just kind of responds with, oh yeah, I guess it's darker, I suppose, but I wouldn't say it's despair. After all, I am the judgment of gods. I am Yuha Baha's chosen, and I have giant laser cannons. A messenger of God would never despair. So he just, like, unloads on the building and just tries to just kill Shunsui. I mean, he's done with the pretenses at this point. However, Shunsui is able to dodge that, and as Lilia says right here, I don't have any idea what your Bankai does, but it is clear about one thing. If the wielder of the sword dies, so does the Bankai. I mean, the logic there, Lilia, doesn't really... I mean, it's... Okay, it's not wrong, but at the same time, it's like, I have no idea what your Bankai will do. But if I kill you, it won't have a chance to do anything. And it's like, you're already very clearly affected by it. You're already very clearly... You've even noticed something weird is going on. You're already clearly in the effect. But okay, fine. So we have the first ability of Katen Kyokatsu Karamatsu Shinju, and it's the sharing of wounds. And so as the Shikai is children's games made into reality, the Bankai is a play. So it's like a kabuki play broken up into separate acts, 4 acts total. I wonder if there are separate acts. I think there are. In fact, I might even remember... Oh, this might be me misremembering something, but I could have sworn at some point, maybe it was in a club outside or something, it was mentioned there are others. Like, there aren't all, like, is it the same acts every single time? Because that would fit, you know, that there's different children's games that he can play in his Shikai. The Bankai would also have different plays that he could, you know, act out. So, yeah. Act 1, hesitance and appointment of wounds. So any wound that Shunsui has on himself, the enemy will also exhibit. So he has a wound in his, like, kidney on his side and then on his shoulder and I guess his foot as well. And so the exact same wounds will be mirrored on Lilia. So a just giant gash just appears right there on his shoulder, even though technically he doesn't really have shoulders anymore because he doesn't really have arms anymore. But, like, the relative location will also appear. And we just move right in. We don't do, like, Act 1 for a little while, then Act 2 for a little while. Shunsui really wants to end this quick, especially since Nanao is coming back, so I understand why he doesn't want to, like, play around for a bit. He's like, no, we're leading right into Act 2. Act 2 triggers, you know, this is my Bankai. I'm going to strike a really cool pose here, and that's the prologue, and now we're going to get moving. Next is the disease aspect of this. So the disease spreads throughout all of Lilia's body. These, like, black abrasions appear, and then he begins to just splurt blood out of his mouth and eyes and, like, every orifice. He just begins to hack up blood. And then we get into the third act, where everything goes underwater. And this is special kind of water. Once again, it's not really messing with your actual body. Lilia tries to, like, swim up. It's called the Severing Abyss. He tries to swim up using his wings, but it's not real water. It's not like, oh, I will flap my wings propulsion to get me up to the surface. That's not how this works. It is literally just like an illusion made into reality here. So he just keeps sinking down and down into the abyss. He's like, of course, we've flung ourselves into the river. And the theme of the play is two lovers or two individuals casting themselves in the river to die, okay? That to die together. That is the nature of the play that they're acting out. Therefore, the players have to adhere to the script, as it were, right? It's too late to be flapping now. Interesting line of dialogue. You're going to get dragged down. So then we have the appearance of Ohana, or Katen, and she, of course, is the super sexy Zanpakuto spirit here. We see her during the Zanpakuto Rebellion. The appearance of the Zanpakuto spirits was all drawn by Kubo, so it makes sense that he would use the exact same design here. It was actually really cool seeing Ohana or Katen in the manga for the first time, because that was one of those instances where you actually see something from a filler arc being drawn by the mangaka. That was really cool. Also was really cool to see that member of the, I think it was like Raizen or Raiga in Naruto. He shows up in the anime, and then, like, years and years later, Kishimoto draws him in the manga as an actual member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. So it was actually really cool to see that kind of stuff, right? So, Ohana brings up that he's wearing another woman's kimono. This is in reference to his backstory that we're going to get in probably not the next episode, but the one after that. Ties into his brother and his brother's wife and everything there, and a promise that he made, and everybody that keeps dying keeps handing him something as a keepsake, and he keeps accruing these keepsakes of people that he loves that are now dead, and he has to keep carrying on their will, and he's like, man, this is a rough living, you know? So, these techniques are cool, but Lilia is not going to die from these wounds. He's also seemingly not going to die from the disease, and he's not going to die from drowning. Even, like, drowning doesn't even really seem to be a thing that they could still talk. So, like I said, it's not real water, so drowning wouldn't even really be the thing. So he's very adamant that a mere Soul Reaper's Bankai could not kill me, and that is when Shunsui activates the final act. A woman's love is so cruel, not giving a man any chance to explain himself at all. What shines at the throat of the lover is the white thread that's soaked with lingering. And so he activates the final act, thread-cutting scissors upon a blood-streaked throat. slices Lilia's throat. And if you think that, like, oh, that's all it is, it just cuts his throat, that's all it is. No, it also makes it explode for good measure. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to cut your throat, but I'm also going to make your head blow up just for good measure. Not a lot of people can walk away after that. And that's true. His head pops like a balloon, and his body begins to sink below the waves. And it's like, we did it! And then Shunsui falls back into Ohana's lap, and we see boobs. The perspective of Shunsui right now is extremely... He's in the shade right now. Let's just say that, right? Now, when I first read this, I always interpreted Shunsui's Bankai as when he uses it, they both die. Like, him and his opponent will both die. That's why he was always kind of hesitant to use it. I don't think that's the case here. I don't think that's the implication that he's going to die as well. It's just that he doesn't like to use it because it drags other people in. There's an overarching theme of the play of two people dying, or casting themselves into the waters. So that was the way I interpret it. Like, that must be the reason. Like, he's going to die that way, right? But no, he doesn't seem worried about that or anything like that. I mean, he seems weakened and stuff, but the implication is he's not going to die. Even Ohana says, just kind of like rest here for a little bit and then, you know, we'll be okay. She tries to like stab him in the face with her fingers of just like, hey, I only have the one eye left. And he's like, well, I guess it's just painful irony that we ended up the same because she also only has one eye. You know, the relationship between a sword and a Shinigami is indeed strange. And so this is an interesting way they cut the episode out here. So they have this beautiful little moment together, and Shunsui says, Ohana, actually, and then we cut away. That's the end of the episode. Seriously. That's it. That's all we get. We don't have a moment of him getting attacked. We don't have Lilia coming back. It literally just is, Ohana, and I find that's a weird way to end the episode. I feel like it would have been better if he just, like, fell back, and then they had a moment where it's like, oh, it's weird that we're the same now. I guess that's just how it is between Shinigami and Soul Reaper. I mean Shinigami and Zanpakuto. Anyway, just rest for now. And then that's it. Then the episode could have ended there. Kind of in the same way that it ended with Mayuri in the last episode where he's like super confident that he's won. Here it's like Shunsui's also in the position that he thinks he's won. He's not as boisterous as Mayuri was, certainly. But he's like, oh, yes, that happened. But no, that's an interesting way to end it. He's just like, Ohana, and then they end the episode. It's like, okay. So we have the ending theme here. It looks cooler every time I see it, actually. It's really awesome. And then, yeah, we don't get a post-credit sequence or anything. We have, I believe, Nemu, you seemingly are hopeless, wandering everywhere to find me. And then the next episode is going to be Baby Hold Your Hand Part 2. So that'll be the continuation and the finale of the fight between Pernida, Mayuri, and Nemuri Nanago. So I'm looking forward to that one because this is a big part for Nemu in the story. It's funny that she made the Tankobon cover for Volume 71, and her fight ends in like the first. Actually, I think it literally opens up. Yeah, it opens up with her dying in this manga, which is funny. It's like, oh yeah, Nemu gets the volume cover. She dies in literally the first page. Oh man, that's funny. Anyway, that was episode 35 of BAN-KAST. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Catch you back here next time for episode 36, Baby Hold Your Hand Part 2. Remember to check out the BAN-KAST channel. Subscribe to that. Subscribe to my main channel, Teching 101. We also have the podcast on Spotify and Google Play. Check it all out at your earliest convenience. Thanks, everybody. Teching signing out.